All right. Well, Dr. Rick Sessinghaus, thanks so much for being a guest on Wicked Smart Golf today. Huge fan over here. Excited to take people through the mental game and getting into a flow state. So thanks again for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Michael. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, you have some great content out there. And I had seen some of it, I think, on like Instagram last year and just on other places on YouTube. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was at the PGA show this year. So at the Open Forum event, for those of you guys that don't know, how do you even describe the Open Forum? Like I've only went 2 years to the show and 2 years to the forum, and I was so caught off guard last year by how heated people get and like about attack angles and things like that. How do you
Yeah.
describe the Open Forum? Because I liked that you started it off.
Well, and a little backstory. I requested to start it off because I didn't want to be in the mayhem later. How about that? I that was my first one because
Oh, okay.
I heard of. I'm not a big confrontational guy who wants to debate things. Everybody's working really hard in the industry. But we have our normal PGA seminars where we give our content. Nobody asks questions out of line. It's very much, oh, thank you for, this is just, we're going to debate it. We're going to see the nitty gritty of golf performance, very technical, and they invited me and I go, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to go first. I know people are going to roll their eyes when I talk about the mental game, but I just want to get off and I'll watch a little bit and I'm going to leave. So I didn't get to see all the big things that happened later in that evening. But it's supposed to be an education conference with very high level coaches who really want to get to the meat and the main causes of everything, from spin rates off wedges to everything. So it's great that we're curious and we want to learn. I don't know. I could think it could be done in different ways, but that's me.
I'm right there with you. I legitimately the first year I was like, what is happening? Like I was so out of like whack. And then this last year I kind of knew it was going to be intense. And then I just kind of sat there and was just literally just taking it all in. And I just was laughing at how heated people got about angle of attack. I'm like, man, I've been playing 25 years and I've never thought about my angle of attack on a wedge. And I think I'm a pretty good golfer. So it's just kind of
Right.
funny.
Yeah.
But I loved what you started to talk about, and no one should be rolling their eyes at you or the mental game. Such a big part of playing wicked smart and getting the most out of your performance. So, can you tell us a little bit of your background before you started, FlowCode and working with all these great players? Because I loved that story that you really told at the beginning of, your own struggles, right? I think that a lot of times us
Correct.
coaches and mental specialists, we usually struggled before, and that's why we want to help people. So, can you take us to your background a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up here in Burbank, California, played a bunch of different sports, was introduced to golf right before I was 13 years old. And it was a summer sport just to play and goof around. I was playing football, basketball, and baseball. And it just really, as I got older, when I was about 16, I went all in. I quit football. I'm going, I'm all in on this. And I was just intrigued by the challenge of it, to be honest with you. I felt I was a above average athlete, but that only did so much for me to play at a high level with golf. And I was intrigued with that. Okay. So I wanted to take on that challenge. And I was a very average junior golfer, but my goal was to play college golf. Very long story short, I had to walk on at Cal State Northridge, a Division I program here in Los Angeles. And the first time I tried out, I played really, really, really well until the last hole where I choked my brains out. And I hit a ball, a 5-iron into the water, which cost me the walk-on spot because I was tied for the lead at that point. And that was, as I told people, the greatest shot I've ever hit. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? You choked. I go, yes. But I identified in that moment, it was not a swing error. I was not prepared for that moment. And that led me down a rabbit hole that I am still going down to this point. Is why did I swing differently in that moment when 71 holes before I was under par, complete control? So the following year, I ended up making the team, walking on. So that was my journey now that the mental game was a key component. This is a long time ago, everybody. This is 30 years ago. So we had a few books out there. I did hire a sports psychologist. It was fine, but I don't think it really got what I wanted. And I started researching a lot of even personal development books to see human performance. Why do we do the things we're doing? And so after college, I became a PGA instructor, swing coach. Been doing that still a little bit on the side, but loved helping people play golf. And as I went along, even beginners and intermediates, I found that, yes, you have to teach them the fundamentals. They have to know how to square the club face up. but they too were experiencing anxiety and fear, even in a lesson. And if they were honest with me, they go, "Oh, Rick, I'm out there. My attitude's bad. I don't even know if I enjoy the game anymore." I'm going, wait a second. My role as a coach is much more than angles and stuff like that. So I went back to school, got a doctorate in applied sports psychology, and wrote a book, and then really, really, really started to utilize that as part of my coaching. Most of my lessons back then were done on the golf course to really help people play the game of golf. Worked with a lot of really, really good players along the way. So that's the long and short of it.
No, that's great. And it's just so funny because my college tryout was the top on the first tee shot into the lake in front of the team, in front of the coach I was playing with. That was supposed to be a tryout. To this day, I would say that's my greatest shot. Honestly, it is, because it changed my life, and it planted the seed for this business that took 10 plus years to sprout. But here we are. And it's so funny that we both use really bad shots, to quote unquote bad shots, to learn and to, hopefully try and figure more of this stuff out. So hopefully, if you guys are listening, if you hit a bad shot, just know that, that's a good learning moment. And,
100%.
you talked about like personal development too. I did something similar. I mean, when I quit my job, I kind of got into personal development. I went to Tony Robbins conferences. I read, 50 books, and I was doing all this stuff. People thought I was in a cult because I was, going to Tony Robbins, jumping around. And I'm like, yeah, if you want to consider it a cult, I'm just trying to get better. Like I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of, got into entrepreneurship, had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I understood, like, this mind is playing a big role on and off the course. So we got to figure it out. And like we talked about before we hit record, we never got any instruction manual, right? We have to figure out how to do this kind of on our own. And I think I've had two different guests now that were coaches, and then they were like, wow, the mental game really plays a big role too, because you can have the best swing in the world, but if you don't have a good routines, if you don't have a good mindset, it's going to be really hard to play your best. So when you were like working with these individuals early on in your career, was that something, did you find like they had the same thing? Was it like anxiety on the first tee? Was it they were great range players, but then they couldn't do anything on the course? What were some of the common tendencies? Because I'm sure that a lot of listeners are probably struggling with some of those right now.
Yeah, I look at it just like a golf swing. I think there's a lot of individuality around it, and I don't coach everybody the same, and I didn't honestly see the same things. There were pieces of it. So I look at the mental game, again, everybody might define it differently. There's different skills. I define it as, state management. What state are you in mentally, emotionally, and physically before you perform an activity? In this case, a golf swing. Am I focused? Am I confident? Am I calm? Well, that's a lot different than distracted, doubt, fear, and tension. That's going to affect my golf swing. So I'm doing everything before somebody pulls the club back. And those questions, if they're answered truthfully, I can get a lot of different answers. Honestly, it could be a complete somebody distraction. Oh, I get distracted by people watching. I have other people, I'm distracted with my too many swing thoughts. And then it might be, no, I'm focused out there, but my confidence on certain shots, I have a lot of doubt. Oh, I don't know what to do with that. And then we have full-blown anxiety and fear where people are so in the future of what could go wrong, it's hard for them to pull the trigger in the moment. So a stress response kicks in, fight or flight. It's going to affect their grip pressure. It's going to affect their timing and such. So I look at it as, state management. And when we can look at it that and people go, when you played your best golf, what were you thinking, feeling, and doing? They go, and it's usually pretty simple stuff, right? Oh, I was focused. I was calm. Didn't have many swing thoughts, no expectations, right? And then you have the other sides, like when you play poorly, what happened? Oh, I got so many swing thoughts. I want to really impress the person I'm playing with. And you just hear a lot of interference, right? And it goes back to a very basic definition that Tim Galloway put out is, your performance is really your potential minus interferences. So everybody has different potentials, different body types, all that kind of stuff. But the interferences is what I am intrigued with. How can I help somebody with? What are the interferences that are getting in the way of that? And again, the list goes on and on. It's a drop-down menu that keeps going, right? But I want to identify those things and give people frameworks and strategies to minimize those and tap in to what I would call their flow state, their best state.
Yes, there's two things there that stuck out to me too, and it was literally exactly where I want to go is state management, because I hear you talk about that a lot. You have that older podcast that had some great stuff. Like I said, I binged a bunch of episodes yesterday. I was just getting wicked smart on the treadmill, losing some weight too. And you talked about state management a lot, and I don't think, because I think the mental game is almost like people just don't really understand. It's like such a blanket statement. It's hard to even conceptually grasp, what do I do to get better at it? So state management is huge, because if you're nervous and you're anxious versus if you're feeling good over a shot, it's going to be night and day difference. And I think a lot of times we get mechanical versus mental breakdowns. And a lot of times we, play bad on the course and we think, oh, it's just a mechanical breakdown, which sometimes it is, of course. But if you're a great range player and then you can't do anything on the course, that's not a mental, that's a mental thing. That's not a mechanical. So I'm glad you talked about state management. Is that something that people, I know you talk about a lot of off course activity too. Like, how can people, I guess, begin to even grasp that concept? Because I feel like state management is awareness. Well, how can people become aware in the first place?
Yeah, no, I want to go back quickly to, like, when you ask people what the mental game is, it does get too general. Oh, it's positive thinking, it's this and that. And that's not that it's wrong. Those are tools. But what are we actually doing? We're actually training ourselves to be in an optimal state for that performance. Okay. That state is started with cognitive side of what am I thinking, right? That thought is going to trigger an emotional response. That emotion is going to create a feeling in my body. And if not dealt with, could interfere, or it could optimize, right? So we start looking at thinking patterns. I do a lot of stuff with reframing language. So being more aware of what are we saying over and over again? How could we shift it and reframe it? And it doesn't mean positive, everybody. It just means, could I look at it differently? Okay. Me saying, I'm going to go hit a ball 300 yards right now. That's a nice statement. It ain't going to happen. Okay. I'm a little tighter than I used to be.
I think you got 300.
About 260. Okay. So the point of it is not about boosting things up that are not true, but it is being aware that my thought patterns, which are patterns just like a swing pattern, could now trigger an emotional response. And that emotion, frustration or anxious, or that's going to go through your body. I look at emotions as energy in motion, energy going through your body, and my body's going to feel something. Well, in other range situations, we are in a different environment. We probably don't have the same triggers that's happening. Thus, I might be in a different state. It might be calm, relaxed, whatever it may be. My swing is going to have a different timing to it and a different feel. Okay. So what I ask everybody is, back to when you played your best golf, what state were you in? And then how can we reverse engineer that? Well, I was calm and focused. Great. What led to calm and focus? Well, Rick, I got to the course plenty of time. I did my stretching. And we talk about, wow, they actually had some control over their state because they gave themselves enough time to warm up and they didn't have any expectations. And they went through their routines with a nice smooth breath and they visualized with clarity and they did body scans, right? So it's back to thinking about when you're at your best and reverse engineering that. Now, most of the time in mental game, honestly, people are on the other side of that spectrum, right? They're in a fierce state, and we have to ask the same questions. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? What's triggering that anxiety response? Okay. I'm playing golf in front of somebody. Oh my gosh, it's a tournament. It's really important to me, and it's anxiety. Well, we know how we look at things, mindset wise, will affect how we feel. So we have players who look at it as a threat. That's going to be now, unfortunately, anxiety and fear. That same situation by somebody else who's playing in your group, they could go, bring it on. This is a challenge. I love challenges. I do that. So mindset and shifting what it means to you is so important, because you're going to be triggered by your environment. And I want to know, you can't always control your environment, but you want to be able to control your response to it. So I can go off the rails on all that stuff. But
No, you can never go down the rabbit hole too much with the mental game. I always say stay off the YouTube University rabbit holes. That's how you really confuse yourself in your swing. But the mental game, you can't really go too far down on that. You've been doing it, you said 30 years, right? So yeah. I think the goal of the mental game is to get into a flow state, right? That is the goal. So you're obviously wicked smart with all your degrees. You've worked with so many great players. Can you explain what is a flow state? Because I think a lot of people confuse the zone or think that they have to be really good at golf to do it. And I always say, like, you've been in the zone, whether it was a hole, 3 holes, maybe you had a whole day, you've been in it. And like you talked about, you have to figure out those good days and reverse engineer it. Can you just kind of explain what's happening in the brain during those flow states so we can start to understand how to get in it more often?
Yeah, it's a great question, because when I was going through my master's and doctorate and going through the sports psychology classes, back then they would label it the zone. Okay, the zone. And it actually, believe it or not, wasn't studied much, because the researchers and psychologists go, it just happens so fleeting. We're not really sure what triggers it. So it's nice to talk about, but we're going to actually talk more about this other stuff. And I go, that doesn't make sense to me. In a golf swing, do we just go, I'm going to teach you a kind of good technique? You would want to teach an optimal technique, right?
Right.
So fast forward, a gentleman by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, we call him the godfather of flow. He was a part of positive psychology, which is looking at people's strengths and values and enhancing that for livelihood, for fulfillment and happiness, right? But he tapped also into performance, and he found something called the flow state, which again, now, which I'm so excited about, can be researched with brainwaves, neurochemicals, and what's actually going heart rate variability. So we now know that when we're in a flow state, when we're fully immersed in the present moment, flow follows focus, everybody. You got to be in the present, okay? And you believe you have the skills to match the challenge in front of you. So you have confidence, like, I can do this. You're actually looking forward, okay, called an autotelic experience. I'm actually want to do it for just the joy of doing it itself. It's not tied to anything else. That what happens is when we're in that moment, brainwave activity starts to go down. There's less thinking, okay? Time distortion happens, and we are so absorbed in the moment, we literally are not in the future or in the past, right? But we can now train it with, I use a lot of EEG headsets. I use heart rate variability. I use some other tools to help people understand that we can train it, we can measure it, and then we can try different interventions to help, in this case, let's say, bring the brainwaves down, right? Less thinking when you're executing the shot. So flow state is something that's researched. It's something that is now replacing the zone because we have all these markers that we know led to this state. We know that there's these things that lead to this. And now we can, again, in golf especially, it's a non-reactionary sport. We can reverse engineer that easier sometimes than other sports.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is like you have to reverse engineer it. And I had a round last year that was probably my actually two of them specifically that I didn't even know where I was at in the round. And I've had students and people listen to podcasts be like, "There's no way you didn't know that." And I was like, I had no clue. And it was beautiful. Like, it was so good. And I added up the score. I'm like, holy shit, I just 66 in this tournament. I didn't even feel like anything. And I wasn't tired after the day. And it's just amazing when you can do it. And like after that round, I wrote down everything I did before, what I was thinking during, because I'm just like you, right? I'm trying to reverse engineer it. I always tell all my students, write down 3 to 5 good shots you hit every round. Even your worst rounds, they have good shots, right? We got to kind of do it. But what were you thinking? What were you doing? And it's so cool when you start to find it a little bit more often. And one thing you said earlier too is that the mental game isn't like just do this approach. It works for everyone. It is individualized. Tiger Woods is very different than, Sergio or Rory or, insert golfer here. You have to figure out kind of what your flow state is, right? So what is, you talk about getting from fear to flow. I really, really like this. I heard you say on a podcast, it's like a dimmer switch. So everyone kind of, it's not like you're in the zone or you're not, right? So it's like, what can we do? I know you talk about flow triggers and stuff inside your academy. Can you give us a few examples? Like, let's say, the biggest thing I hear from my audience is blow up holes, man. They hit one bad shot and spirals out of control, and then it's a blow up hole. Then the next hole sucks, right? We've all been there. But a lot of times, if we have some sort of mental trigger that we can do to just be like, that was one bad shot, let's focus on the next one. Like, what are some things people can be doing during the round to calm that Hulk rage down and hopefully avoid those big numbers?
Sure. So specifically with that, I would also go back to what led to the big number in the first place. Sometimes it's the breakdown in focus. Sometimes it's already, if they were truthful, they were fearful over the shot. And then what you're saying, which I agree with, is emotional regulation, is the environment. I just hit a bad shot into the trees or the water. I react. Okay. And people react in a stimulus response in a very short window. And I used to slam clubs and yell and all that kind of stuff. And so at that moment, I would shift somebody from being a critical mindset, which is beating yourself up. I can't believe I did this. I suck, to a curious mindset, which is I wonder why that happened, because I certainly don't want it to happen in the future. And was that a mental error or a physical error? So a mental error would be somebody was already distracted, had doubts, wasn't committed. They hit the shot anyways. Okay. Or they can be honest and say, Rick, I went through my routine. I had a clear target. I felt relaxed, felt ready. Ball still went left. And I always joke, okay, go blame your swing coach now. Okay. Because that would be a mechanic. It would be a mechanical error now because, and maybe you have a default. I come back, I come under plane, I flip the hands, and that's just a motor pattern that you tend to have too. That's a pattern. There's mental patterns. But if after that, it's a way to diffuse that and process it. Notice I didn't say, forget about it. Your brain's not going to forget about it, everybody. Especially when you're getting frustrated, angry, you're actually putting an emotional stamp on that, and you're going to remember it even clearer next time. So process it in a way where you go, I'm going to learn. And then in between shots, I call it transitional phase. What are you doing in those 2, 3, sometimes 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. Most people are looking down at the ground, internally beating themselves up with self-talk, posture's poor, and you just see that some seething, right? So I like to get people's eyes up. Call it expanded awareness, get kind of about 180 degrees around you. You could count your steps. There's mindfulness walking. There's breathing. Inhale, maybe 3, exhale, 5, 6. We want to let that out, get back into the parasympathetic. So, but it's back to we want to judge ourselves so quickly, and that judgment creates the emotion, frustration, anger. And if you don't work with it, it's like for me, it became the bogey train pretty quick because emotions now are going to affect your focus. Emotions are going to affect your decision making and emotions are going to affect literally your physical body. So we do need to process them after shots. So you will never hear me say, just forget about it. You hit it in somebody's backyard. That's okay. No, it's not. We want to hit good shots. Okay. Right. So let's be honest with ourselves and let's learn from that.
Okay. That's a good point. So it's okay to acknowledge it was a bad shot. I think so many of us try to bury it and just be like,
come on, everybody. It happened. Come on.
You're going to get that next ball. You're going to reload. So you have to accept it, basically. Is that, yeah. So that's
a superpower right there. Acceptance. Okay. Mm-hmm. We don't want to admit we just hit that shot. Mm-hmm. Okay. So denial is not going to do you any good. Accept it. Now, so it did happen. You now have an opportunity of how you're going to react to it or respond. Mm-hmm. React is very easy. Subconscious, you suck, Rick. Instead of saying, I go now, honestly, I'll say that shot sucks, but I don't say you suck, Rick.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to get it detached a little bit. And that shot, or I try to get as factual as possible. That shot went 70 yards to the left of my intended line. I wonder why.
Right.
That to me is an important element.
Yes. So when you ask yourself that though, I'm always curious. I wonder why that went. You're not actually thinking like what that was of mental, or are you actually thinking that? Or are you saving the analyzing for after the round? That's always one thing I'm a little.
Okay. Yeah. So I was such a hothead. I had to do it in the moment. There was no, we'll talk about it later. I had to process it then because it kept spinning in the back of my head.
Okay.
So for me, again, other people might be different.
Yeah. This is good.
I needed to process it as quickly as possible. And I actually did a visualization exercise years ago where I would play, and I know people are going to go, this is not how you're supposed to use visualization, but it is. I would play bad patterns of shots in my head that usually got me angry and frustrated. See myself react in a different way. Okay. So old Rick, see shot go left, slam a club immediately, you suck. Okay. Now I would replay in my head, okay, what else could you do? You could just slam club and not say you suck. You could yell out loud, you were really horrible. You could do nothing. I would play all the variables and going, which is reasonable for me? And mine was, I'm going to allow myself to be disappointed on the shot instead of angry, and I'm going to learn. So I had to play different scenarios of how did I actually want to act, and I played them out in my head first. Then, I had to work on it. I had to work on a post-shot routine. That's something I'm very, very passionate about. Post-shot routine is being able to emotionally regulate yourself no matter what happens. Maybe I made an eagle. Oh, yeah. And now I got adrenaline pumping through my body. That's awesome. It seems like a positive emotion, but is that the emotion I want to be on the next tee? I don't know. So that's where the post-shot routine for me was vital. I needed to process in the moment. Now I have, with some of my clients, I joke with them. I said, okay, 18 holes. Your goal is to be composed. After the round, you can call me up and you can yell and scream at me. You should have seen this shot. I hit this, blah, blah. I go, are you done? And then they go, yeah, okay, I'm done. So they say, how do I let it out? How do I vent? I go, you can vent later and yell at me later or send me an angry text or something. We do have to process it though. So that's kind of where I'm instantaneous. I've now learned hit shot, observe shot, not react, just observe shot, and then wonder what happened. So I've actually trained myself. I don't react within 2 seconds like I used to.
That's huge. I mean, I hope everyone heard that too. And you said that's not the way or that you think that some people think that's not the way you're supposed to visualize, but it sounds like that obviously worked well for you. Is that something you were doing off the course then to try and be like the day before a tournament? Yeah.
I had I had to do a lot of deep stuff there, Michael. So I would sit in this chair. I remember back late college, sit in this chair and I would replay these shots that really did get me mad over and over again. Okay, how else could you have reacted? I keep running. Okay, you can do this. Could you put a smile on your face? I go, no, that's not me. Could I laugh about it? Probably not. So I would run every scenario, honestly. And I go, what could I do? And I go, I'd be disappointed. Yeah. I could watch the shot and I can learn from it. Boom. Okay. So I played, we would call that negative visualization in order to come up with a positive behavior that I wanted.
I think that's so powerful though. You know, I think that's so good. Like the reason I'm laughing too is I've broken more clubs and slammed and just done the stupidest shit over the years. And so that's why I really like, there's so many ways to use visualization. There's so many ways to do stuff when you're off the course. And I had a guest talk about how you should actually expect bad shots and how you should think about them the day before, because when's the last time you played around and had perfect shots? You're going to have adversity. You have to prepare for it, which is exactly what you were doing. So I'm really glad you said that. And that's something that people can be doing off the course. And then it's like you said, figuring out what is your, I don't want to say freak out, but your tendency, right? Because everyone's different. Some people, it's the club throw, the club slam. Some people just beat themselves up. You know, some people pout. Like, you have to figure out what it is that is really like, it's not helping your game, but it just happens, right? So I'm glad you said that. And then you just kind of use your mind to be like, what are some other ways we could do this? I think that's so powerful. I hope everyone just heard that and like applies that instantly, because I know in my own 25 years of playing, I wish I could have just been like, you got to be prepared for it. So that way, when it does happen, because bad shots are going to happen no matter how good you get, you're at least a little bit more prepared, and hopefully you can avoid those big numbers.
I agree. Totally.
Yeah, no, I'm just so glad you said that. I never had a guest talk about it like that. One thing too, which is funny, by the way, before I get to the next question, you said that you were a hothead. In your videos, everything I've heard about, you seem like the most calm, cool, collected guy. So whatever training you did worked, because I would never see you as a hothead.
So let me tell you, this is a very important story for me. I think I wrote it in my book, but I was 16, 17 years old. I was starting to get pretty good at the game, and went out to a local course here in Los Angeles, played with one of my mentors. She was a PGA instructor. She was just fantastic. And after the round of golf, we get off and she goes, I'm never playing golf with you again. And I go, I didn't play that bad. I shot 75 or whatever. She goes, no, you're miserable on the golf course. You made everybody else miserable. And that was like, oh my God, this is one of my best friends, my mentor, who's calling me out. So I knew I had a temper, but I was now affecting everybody else. And that was my first introduction almost to the mental game, because she helped mentor me on that. But I'm like, wait, is that who I want to be out there? So sometimes things trigger. Yeah. So I would think, yes, I'm a fairly composed, positive guy off of the golf course, even back then. But for something, I had triggers because golf was so important to me, and it became my identity, right? It's like, oh, that's who Rick is. He's a golfer. And so if I played poorly, I really took it serious. And every little shot now reminded me of failure. I didn't have a good thing. But yeah, for the most part, I'm a real positive guy, not necessarily on the golf course back then.
Yeah, no, it's just like you said, all goes back to self-awareness and managing that state and figuring out what's holding you back. Man, so much good stuff. One of the things you talk about too is your energy management, and how, like, when you do get really upset or you have your trigger or whatever, it is exhausting. I think you mentioned in one of your episodes, grinding, right? Anytime you feel like you're grinding out there, that doesn't sound fun. I mean, sometimes it is if you're slapping it around, but you still are able to grind out pars and birdies. Like that's kind of rewarding those days. But yeah, mentally grinding is tough. And I think you mentioned that it's just really, really taxing on your mind when you're having those days. So like, what can people be doing during the round to focus? I get a lot of questions about focus. Should I focus the whole round? Should I focus, XYZ? I get a lot on that. So how can people focus to conserve their energy and play well from hole 1 to 18 and not feel like a grind out there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because most of the time we talk about energy being physical. Oh, am I physically tired? Right? I can sense that. And I was always amazed that I could play a football game. Yeah, I was tired a little bit, and then I could go play 18 holes, and I was exhausted. I go, I'm just walking around, for crying out loud, not running around getting my head beat off, and I'm more tired doing this. How does that? So I go, wow, the negativity, the beating up, the energy that was just frustration, it just chips away at your overall energy storage, right? And so we talked about post-shot routine in a way to minimize. So emotions have intensity of emotion. So I used to get angry and frustrated, which is a high intensity going through me. Other people's, like you say, could go pouting. They could just get down on themselves. Okay, that's a different energy, less energy. Okay, so you have an intensity, but more importantly, you have a duration. How long does the emotion stay with you? So I've been, when I was working with Colin Morikawa and practice round, he's with John Rahm or something like that. I've seen John Rahm get a little mad. Okay. Yet 10 seconds later, not mad. Oh, interesting. High intensity, but not long duration, right? You saw that with Tiger back in the day. So I'm not going to be the one who says, oh, don't get mad per se. We have to be careful of the intensity because it's harder to come back down to neutral. Like I now go from frustration, I allow myself to get disappointed. That's a much easier emotion to deal with. But how long does that emotion stay with you? Even those people who pout, okay, and they bring their energy down and they just tank it. Well, it doesn't matter anymore, right? And they're tanking. They have physical energy, no, but they don't want to have any mental energy to take out there. So I do a lot of the post-shot routine, a lot of the transition of what am I doing the 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes in between shots. And sometimes you use things like, reboot your computer, right? You have too many browsers open, you got too many windows open, it runs slow, it's stuck.
Yeah.
I got to turn the damn thing off and reboot it, right?
Right.
Sometimes that means in between shots, I have to get out of my head. I would, again, like I said, I look out in the distance. I go very, very wide because if I go external wide, that's the opposite of anxiety, which is internal narrow, and I'm spinning in my head. I have to go opposite. The breathing rates in between, mindfulness walking. There's different ways to manage that energy. But then, and then we'll get into focus here in a second, how do I get myself centered to get ready for the next shot? There has to be an intention behind that, and there has to be, which we can talk a little bit more in a moment about focus. But energy is super important. And yes, we literally can't focus for 4.5 straight hours. So a lot of the research on flow, a macro flow is I do corporate speaking, and we say if somebody can get into flow for 30 minutes early in the day, a 30-minute block, they can get a lot done. A lot done. But if you try to go, I'm going to go 90 minutes, you probably won't be able to, right? So it's a muscle you have to build. In golf, I like to look at it as 80 micro flow moments, okay? 80 shots, 80 micro flow moments that may not be fully absorbed, like you're lost in the, but for 30 seconds, I can be completely absorbed in the moment, calm, confident, and we tack on these micro flow moments along the way. Does that make sense?
Makes so much sense. Yeah, I think the intensity and duration is huge because I remember hearing Tiger even say to Charlie, you can get as mad as you want, but as long as you're 100% on that next shot, you can't let it impact the next one. And Tiger, like you said, great example. John Rahm, great example. The problem is people, and I always say that, like I'll say, to my audience, we really want to be careful about getting too mad out there. And they're like, well, John Rahm does it. I'm like, well, if you can calm down in 10 seconds like John Rahm, have at it. But I have a feeling you can't. So it is obviously knowing your tendencies, knowing your personality in a sense, and what triggers you and how you need to react to get over it. But it is bouncing back. And you talk about intention a lot too. And is that how we get into those 80 kind of like tunnel vision for those 80 or less shots around? Is that really getting clear about your intentions? Is that part of a pre-shot routine? And how does that all work together?
Yeah, definitely. Focus, attention, concentration. Those are similar words. The focus has different. I learned he was a sports psychologist for the Olympic team, and he talked about we go through these different quadrants when we focus. And golf, it's awesome because the ball doesn't move. So we actually can go all through all these quadrants. So let me quickly explain. So focus starts with what we call being externally broad. We get to our ball. Now, I would highly advise people to have a trigger that starts their routine. Maybe it's set the bag down, get out of the cart. Your first foot on the ground means it's golf time. We've shifted. and then ask questions about the environment. How is the lie going to affect the ball? Where's the wind coming from? How is my carry distance over the bunker? How firm is this green, right? I can ask all these questions. That's a lot of information that's external to you and broad, ton of information. That's focus quadrant 1. Then take that information in, we get internal. What does that mean to me? Well, you and I could play the same exact shot, and I guarantee you we're going to hit a different club. You're going to hit the ball further than I, you're going to have a shorter club, and we're going to still be fine and confident, but we know our game because we're analyzing it based on ourself. Now, part of the analyzing, everybody, is being aware of how you're feeling in that moment, okay? If you're mad, you're probably making a risky decision coming up here in a moment. So we have external broad, we bring that information in internally, we're figuring it out, and then we got to get narrow with it. We have to make a decision. So that's a form of focus too. Am I going to hit the full 8 iron? Am I going to hit a 3/4 7 iron? Am I going to hit a fade? Good players actually have harder time with that step 3 because they have too many tools in their toolbox. Okay,
that's true.
I could do this. I could do that. I don't. Either one could work. I go. You only get one ball. Sorry. Okay?
Yeah.
So decision is a very now narrow part of focus, and it's internal still. Yet when we get over the ball in a perfect world, everybody, we would want to execute the golf shot in an external narrow focus. I am thinking of the target. I am reacting to the target. Okay. So those are what we call focus channels. Okay. Now, I use, as I mentioned before, ways to trigger the initial routine. When my bag goes down, it's golf time. I'm not talking to my buddies anymore. It's golf time. And my eyes go directly to the lie because I feel the lie of the ball is the most important element.
Yeah.
And I don't say, is this a good lie or a bad lie, everybody? That doesn't exist. I say, how is this lie going to affect the ball flight? Problem solve. Then I would go out to potential, looking at the hazards. Okay, I got to take a lot of information in. Mm-hmm. So realize that we have a start point, and then we actually take all this information, we start to funnel it down, and then we execute a shot. Now, along those way, we can help strengthen the focus with visualization. So I ask people, what does a good shot look like here? And I want them to get as creative as possible. Okay. And I've said this on other podcasts. I had this one player, super analytical. And I said, I want you to see a shot tracer in pink with glitter on it. And when the ball hits the green, explodes into fireworks. He called me a few names first. And then he said, okay. And then he hit it. And I go, I bet you could not think of that. Right. And he goes, yeah, I saw the pink. Because it was mad that he got in his creative mind for the first time in his life. Right. But the visualization helps us focus on what we want. Right. We have the blinders on there. So there's different elements that we can utilize, but that's what the focus channels and where our focus is going. We certainly have distractions, and that's what, you and I as coaches are trying to uncover is the interference. It's easy to teach a pre-shot routine. Okay. If people are honest and they say, yeah, Rick, but I'm in between clubs, or, oh, I don't like this whole location. I don't like where the wind's coming from. They have to be honest with that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Choose a different shot. You can always have other options. Okay. So I think people, they get locked into the interferences and the doubts and the distractions so much, then they say, oh, I don't know how to focus. It's like, no, you know how to focus. You just have to refocus quite quickly. Mm-hmm. So awareness, my mind is on something that's irrelevant. I bring it back. That in itself is a skill. So with FlowCode, we talk a lot about off-course training, mindfulness, breathing, and you're not going to be able to, even for 3 minutes doing a breathing rate, not be able to stay focused completely for 3 minutes just on breath. Mm-hmm. Your mind will wander. How quickly can you be aware and bring it back? That's the superpower.
Yeah, you talk about routines a lot. I talk about routines a lot. And like you said, it's learning it, how to have one, and making it actually consistent enough to call it a routine is key. And the biggest thing I always say from watching professionals or just elite amateurs versus the everyday golfer is where the routine is happening. And I've never seen a tour player do a routine next to the golf ball other than like chipping or putting. Full swings, they're always doing them behind. But when you look at the everyday golfer, they're right next to it. They scoot up. Why is that not helpful? So hopefully people can, figure out why routine should be happening behind the golf ball to do a lot of what you just said. Because I know you've seen the highest levels of golf from the Ryder Cup, majors, everything like that. Why is that so important?
I'm going to talk about perspective is that when you're behind a ball, it's kind of, we call it kind of disassociated visualization. I'm kind of looking at everything like on a movie screen, right? And I think I get a better understanding what's out there. When I'm side of the ball, looking down and in my swing, I think my perception is going to change a little bit. And we want accurate perception of what's happening in front of us. I think it's easier to visualize behind the ball than by the side of the ball. I just how our eyes are worked. We want them to be more level to the ground instead of turned. And I think it's more of this centering idea of settling in, and then we're going to approach the shot. I think it kind of has a centering approach to it also. And you're right, like with short game, I have no problem with somebody doing a practice swing, obviously by the side of the ball, especially if it's a hanging lie or something like that.
Yeah, right.
But they come back and they regroup and say, okay, based on that, now this is what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I think it just helps I think when people are right by the ball, I think it looks rushed and there is no rhythm to it. But I think if we can pace the routine as we walk in, it's a sense of, like I said, smoothness and centerness, and that's part of state management also.
Mm-hmm. And what about putting routines? Because I know that putting is where a lot of people really seem to, you can see the ball, you see the hole, you're like, damn it, like, why can't I make this 8-footer? Obviously, expectation management is key, but like, what can people be doing on the greens too, right? Not 3-putting is, I hear that so many times. I title everything "How to Not 3-Putt" because I know it's going to get people to watch or listen. Well, what are some things that people can be doing on the greens mentally to get into that flow and out of fear?
It's interesting. Putting, I would call myself an average putting coach. Now that's different than a mental coach, right? It's just the mechanics of it and everything like that. But I've seen a lot in the last 10 years, obviously with aim point and different routines that are based on having clarity of your read, which is super important, isn't it? Okay. Right. And that's a key element of somebody committing to a putt, right? I need to know my read. Mm-hmm. Even that is starting to look a little mechanical to me. I'll be honest with you. Okay. But hey, when you're feeling it in your feet and you're feeling it, and you're being very aware of 1, 2, 3 degree. Great. I think you're aware of that. I would want it to shift a little bit more. And again, to seeing the ball go in the hole. When people say, I don't want a 3-putt, I say, what's your intention on the first putt? And it might be, oh, don't go long. And to me, that's not a clear intention. A clear intention is I want to have the ball go at the correct speed. I want to enter at 7 o'clock. Mm-hmm. But you mean I should expect to make every putt? I said, no, not to expect it to go in, but isn't the intention to get the little white ball in the little hole? Mm-hmm. So a 30-footer, I'm seeing the ball go in. I'm not going to a 2-foot circle, 4-foot circle, whatever that is. Yeah. Okay. I'm seeing the ball go in the hole. Okay. Because that's the intention of speed too. I want that ball to some of these guys on tour, 1 speed, 2 speed, 3 speed, or what's your capture rate? All these, they're very clear on that. So it's like, I want the ball to run through the hole at 12 inches. Okay. That means the ball went into the hole. Ball went in the hole, went through the hole, not past the hole. Not past the hole. Right. So the words we use are going to be very important. I think it's, I've had this discussion with a lot of very good players of how do they see the putt go in. Some can see the entire, when this ball starts, it gets to its apex and goes in. Some people like myself are more, I take the how much I think it's going to break, let's say 6 inches outside right edge. And I imagine I'm just going to a straight putt to that cup 6 inches outside right edge. I'm more linear. And then I'm allowing, of course, the ball would hit the slope. So people are different in their visualizations. Some people pick up the last third of the putt. Some people are, I know another sports psychologist who is great. And he talked a lot about intermediate targets that were 1 inch in front of you.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to like that. Right.
Now, that gets the ball started on line. I have a lot of people who leave the ball short because they forgot where they're actually going. So there's you can manipulate targets, because remember, targets not only to aim at, but speed control. You have to have an awareness of speed control. And that's where I think people get very line bound in golf, and they forget it's going to be hit at the proper speed, acceleration rate, those type of things. And when people can see that happening in the right speed, woo, that's a game changer.
So 2 things I took from that. One is to figure out how you like to see the putt. Like you said, if it's in front of you, if it's the apex, if it's going in the hole. I think that's so key. And then the other thing is to just, it's always try and make it. I feel like Dr. Bob Rotella talked about that, have a green light mentality. I hear a lot of guys, when I'm out there, when I play a practice round and, I just get paired up with some random golfers and I'll hear them say, I'm just trying to lag it up. And I'm like, ugh. I really don't like that. I really want you to try and make it. And then people love to push back and say, if you, and I understand, I'm not saying you have to jam it in the hole at, 3-speed or whatever, right? But it's like, so you're saying you want to try to make everyone, whether it's a 3-footer or a 50-footer, that doesn't mean you need to nuke it just to say you got it there, though.
What's the appropriate speed for the ball to go in the hole? 8, people talk capture rate, 17 inches through the hole. Great. I'm going to see all my putts go through the hole 17 inches. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's a 30-footer, 4-footer, or if it's for birdie, par, bogey. That's the intention that I want. But people then put into, I don't want a 3-putt. I don't want to ram it by, and then they leave it 5 feet short. Yeah. It's like, well, you didn't ram it by, so you met the intention. That's awesome. But if the intention is, let's be honest, this is a slippery downhill putt. I'm going to respect the speed.
Yeah.
And now I want it to just drip in the front edge and fall. I'm problem solving the situation to what is the solution, not to what I don't want all the time that happens. Don't 3-putt, don't what's the first putt? What's the intention of the first putt? I think is lost.
Gosh, it's just crazy how much this thing plays such a role in our game and every shot. Before getting into my last question here, again, you have a brilliant mind. I really appreciate all you're doing for the golf world. I've learned so much myself today. Tell us more about FlowCode. I know you guys help golfers, you help golf coaches. Tell us more. This is fascinating what you've been doing, how long you've been doing it. Obviously worked with the best, some of the best golfers in the world.
Yeah.
How did it all start, and how can people learn more?
Well, thank you. I'll say back to failure. Okay. So 2 times in my coaching career, I wanted to start an online business, right? Hey, we got to get those videos out there and these classes. And I failed miserably twice. Okay. Now, part of that was the team you're with. And now I have one of the best teams out there. I have a couple partners, one gentleman, Sergey Petrovic, who's genius, and he's in Slovenia of all places, everybody. And he has a background in sports psychology also. Him and I came from the same type of education in a way. And we looked at things similar, not identical. And I really liked his frameworks. He liked mine. And about 4 years ago, we said, let's do something in golf. It's kind of where my industry is. He goes, great. And so we have certifications for coaches. Okay. We have 140 certified coaches worldwide. Show you the framework, show you how to apply it. What's a coaching session? I mentor throughout. And then we have business to consumer, certainly that golfer out there who wants to learn more about the mental game, and it's online. And we have what we think is very unique. We have something called a Flow Gym, which is a flow club, but we call it a Flow Gym, where you are daily. We have coaches who are live with you. Okay. That is actually putting you through breathing and meditation and all these type of things
in real time.
Okay. Wow. This is live. This is live because we feel that these tools need to be trained. Okay. And so we might as well have a coach to help you. And I do one every Thursday morning, and I help people with mindsets and breathing and different triggers that we utilize. And we're going into other sports. We do some stuff in corporate, but it's the idea, again, performance is state dependent. And, so FlowCode for the golf side, you can go flowcode.golf, flowcode.golf. To learn more about just the company, it's called www.theflowcode.com. So thank you for letting me share that.
Of course. No, that's amazing. Congrats on having all the coaches too. And I like the off course training. That's great. I mean, like you can't just expect your mind to show up at the golf course when you don't do anything at home. So yeah, that's awesome. And to have all the coaches and live sessions, well done. Love all that. For my last question, I guess, what is something that, you've been to the Ryder Cup, you've been to major championships, you've been to the, amazing PGA Tour events. What's something that pros do mentally that we maybe don't even, realize, or something that maybe surprise the everyday golfer?
Great question. I think, and this will sound like a weird answer, but I think a lot of them have not had any mental game training. Up to this point, they're extremely talented. They've worked very, very, very hard. Okay. Then they seek mental game coaches when things go off the rails. Okay. There are others who, whether it was their swing coach or somebody else, had an influence on them early, and they started some of these routines earlier in life. And I think the younger generation is more apt to that. They have podcasts, and you have all these great apps that are out there to help with mindfulness and stuff. So people are more open to it now. I would say that for the most part, they're very good at keeping things in perspective, because they play so much golf now. I mean, that's the thing is people don't understand the amount of golf they play. They see them on Thursday through Sunday. They don't see that they've traveled Monday morning and they've played 9 holes that and 18 holes on Tuesday and maybe another 18 on Wednesday. And there is a back to the energy. There's a physical grind that happens.
Definitely.
And they do an amazing job of recovery. They do an amazing of job. I think I'm just amazed. When I was working with Colin Morikawa, is when he won his first major, won his second major, and then I mean he's pulled in all directions and he can compartmentalize things quite well. It's like, okay, I do my media, I do this, and now it's golf time. I'm amazed at some of these guys' ability to compartmentalize, and when they're in between the ropes, they are golfers and they are focused.
Yeah, that's interesting. And watching Full Swing season 2, I love the emphasis on the mental game. It seems like that was a thread throughout almost every episode, which was great for us and hopefully getting the message out there. And the second thing though was just the obligations they have, especially as you become more popular. I mean, all the photo shoots and this and that, like, and it's like, hey, I still got to go play golf. I still got to keep my card. It looks exhausting. So yeah, mental game is huge. Thank you again. Seriously, really appreciate you being here. I know you got a lot of projects going on, and just want to say thanks again for being a guest on Wicked Smart Golf.
Thanks for having me, Michael.